Chica. So this is the third in the little 3-part video series all about when to throw the 2-pound rule out the window when it comes to stabilizing in phase 3. So the first 2 reasons we've already discussed in 2 other videos, and I will link to those in the article that goes with this video. The first one had to do with if you didn't eat the fruits and melba in phase 2. So we talked all about that, and I'll link to it. And then the second reason that you might have to stabilize outside of that 2-pound window is if you incorporate vigorous exercise in phase 3. So we talked all about that in the second video. And now we are on to the last video, and this is all about basically you're in phase 3, and despite doing, you know, a million steak days, just steak day after steak day, your weight is just not staying in that 2-pound window, and it's continuing to kind of gradually go up, and you're at that point where you're like, do I live on steak days every day? So we'll talk all about that in this video. Okay, so this happens. I know that it can be really hard to let go of a few pounds when you worked so hard to lose them. You know, it's like, it's possible that it took you, you know, a whole week or a week and a half even, you know, at the end of your round to lose the last 3 pounds that you lost. And now you might find yourself in this situation where you can't seem to keep that 3 pounds off, you know, and so it can feel really frustrating and be really hard to let it go when you think about how hard you worked, you know, how deprived you were, you know, while you were on P2 in order to get that 3-pound loss, and then here it seems like it's coming back almost overnight. So as a result, you might feel like mentally resistant to the idea of not maintaining, you know, every last ounce that you lost. And I understand that feeling. But there's a certain point where you have to think to yourself, enough is enough. You know, I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. I think fasting is a great tool, but fasting constantly, which is basically what a steak day is. A steak day is, you know, like an 18 to 24-hour fast. Having to fast constantly, in my mind, is not healthy. It's not healthy long term. For instance, when I do my intermittent fasting, at most I would do it 2 days in a week, and I would never continue that for many, many weeks on end. I would, you know, 2 days could be okay. Most of the time I would fast like once a week. Lately I haven't even found it necessary. I do think it's healthy at a certain level. Once a week I think it's actually probably really healthy for some people. But having to get in this pattern where you're living on steak days in order to try to keep your weight in a certain range, that I think is where you have to start thinking to yourself that this isn't working, and that can be unhealthy for your body. So it's just that everything needs to be in balance, right? So if you're having to fast every other day, you know, for weeks on end, I mean, I'll ask you guys, how does that sound to you? Does that sound like a healthy way to go? That's not the type of life that you want to have to live, you know? So in truth, in reality, a lot of women do end up stabilizing 3, 5, 7 pounds over their LDW, their last dose weight, from their round. That's just the reality. It's very common. And the thing to note is, if you lost 25 pounds or 30 pounds in a 6-week round, you still have a good net loss overall. And you want to take what you can from this. I believe in being stubborn up to a point, but at some point being too stubborn can actually hurt you, right? So should you endeavor to stabilize within the 2-pound window if you don't fall into the first or second scenario that we talked about in the other 2 videos, with, you know, not eating fruits in P2 or exercising vigorously in P3? Yes, I definitely think you should try to stabilize in the 2-pound window. But that's the thing again, is how stubborn you should be about it. That's the question. And only you can ultimately decide that. You know, only you're gonna know your own body and what's going on and how you actually feel. Just as an example of the decisions that we have to make, and you know what matters to us most, is a fellow CrossFitter gal that I've seen at my CrossFit. She mentioned to me that she used to compete in one of the women's weightlifting competitions, and so I was asking her about it, you know, but she said the process of getting as lean and ripped as is necessary for these competitions not only made her miserable, She was tired and she didn't feel good at all. So she stopped. And, she looks amazing now still, but she's not as lean as she was in order to be in these competitions. And, the point is, she feels good, she's happy, and that's what counts, right? So at some point, you have to weigh how important looking a certain way or being a certain way is to you versus how happy you can be in order to get it, or how much you have to give up in order to get it. And only you know that balance for you, It's like for me, I love CrossFit so much and I like being strong that I had to be willing to give up having a certain level of thinness. Like, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but like my arms, they're fairly large because they're pretty muscular now. I mentioned in another video that my measurements here on my underbust, they're larger than they were at the end of my 4th round, even though my body fat percent's quite a bit lower. And that is because I have built up quite a bit of muscle in certain areas, but I'm okay with that. I kind of had to process it. I did have to process it. It was a little bit funky for me at first, like realizing that some of the shirts I was wearing were larger shirts again in some cases. I'm still small, I'm a size 4, I'm 5'1", but there are definitely parts of me that are larger than they were. But I'm at peace with it now because CrossFit matters to me, and being able to be strong and to do those things makes me feel very capable, and I just love it. And so for me, that was a trade-off I chose to make. So for you guys, it's like you have to figure out what's most important to you and what can you do to change your life that's reasonable enough that you don't have to also give up everything that made you a happy person. Does that make sense? And there is a balance to that, because definitely you don't want to just give up entirely or don't change your life at all, because you'll be miserable that way too, right? I mean, yeah, I'd love if I could eat a whole chocolate cake still, or just stuff my face into a half gallon of ice cream like I used to. But that was a binge eating disorder. I mean, I had a sugar addiction. That was a problem. And it took me away from my focus on my family. It was very bad for my health. And I was very unhappy, except for that brief period of time while I was actually eating the sugary foods. So that obviously, wasn't the choice to stick to that. Anyway, my point here is that even though you want to stabilize in that 2-pound window, if you're finding that it's just not happening despite your best efforts, you might need to just try letting go a little bit and let your weight go a little higher. And surprisingly, the world won't end. And see if you can actually stabilize just a bit higher. Because I think the fear is that when you can't stabilize in that window that you think you're supposed to, the fear is that you're going to gain it all back, right? That's the kind of the ultimate fear. But it really doesn't have to be that way. And yeah, it sucks, like I said, that you spent a week and a half losing the last 3 pounds, and now you're having to stabilize 5 pounds higher than your LDW, and I get all that. But in the end, if you can actually stabilize without constant steak days at 7 pounds over your LDW, if that's your choice, be stable 7 pounds over your LDW, or do a steak day every 2 days for the rest of your life in order to stay 7 pounds lower. Which one do you want to do, And I guess it's up to you. For instance, to me, I actually do like intermittent fasting, and I think fasting 1 day a week is something that I actually would like and could handle long term. And there's actually all kinds of really good information about that through bradpelon.com. He's a bodybuilder guy, and he's been fasting 1 day a week, I think on Sundays, for like the last 7 years. And he's totally ripped, totally healthy, and it's a great way of life for him, and that's a choice he's made. And I like that idea. I don't do it every week, but sometimes I'll get into a habit of doing it, for a couple months every week. So that, I don't find it too difficult. I feel it's not bad for my health. And so that would be something I would be willing to do in order to either maintain my weight or possibly get even a little bit leaner without HCG. That's something that would be worth it to me. However, if I had to fast 3 days a week in order to maintain my weight or in order to get leaner, I wouldn't do it, and because that's not worth it to me. That starts cutting into my life a little too much, making life too difficult, and so that's something that wouldn't be worth it to me. So if your body just needs a little bit of nudging, you know, with a steak day here and there, in order to get it to stabilize in that 2-pound window, then that's great, and I think you should go for that. However, like I said, if you're finding that you have to do perpetual steak day after steak day, just ongoing and really back to back, really frequently, that's when you might want to consider letting loose a little bit and seeing if you can stabilize a little higher more easily. Now I want to mention one thing, and I'm going to link to a video and article I made on this topic, but there's actually different reasons that you could be having trouble with gaining weight in P3 that you do have control over. And so I will link to that article in this blog post, because that might help you actually to stabilize lower. There are there's various variables. There are multiple variables that are involved when it comes to what's causing you to gain in P3 or not stabilize and stuff like that. So I'll link to that, and you can kind of check over those different points and see if any of those might fit you, things that you may have control over that you could try fixing. But outside of that, you already know, you've done your best effort. Yeah, you might just want to give that a try and just see if you can stabilize a little higher and call it good, Just another example of how we have these decisions to make for our unique situation. I eat much healthier now by choice because it's worth it to me in order to maintain my 50-pound weight loss. In fact, out of the weight that I've lost now, I've lost 2/3 of the fat that I had on my body, almost. I had 59 pounds of fat on my body when I started the HCG protocol, and my last body fat test showed that I had just over 18 pounds of fat on my body. So you can see that so much of my weight loss has been fat. So it's worth it to me because of all that I have. It's not about just being thinner. It's about what I can do at CrossFit. It's about being able to run around. It's about not having to think about my body or how I look in clothes, or I'm just me, and I can move on and do stuff and not think about what I'm looking like. And so for me, that's worth making the dietary changes that I've made. However, say I could maintain my weight 2 or 3 pounds lower than I am right now by eating like 0 carbs, okay? Say that I could do that. Like, I'm stable where I'm at, where I have a healthy amount of carbs, but I eat really healthy, but some healthy carbs. Or I could maintain 3 pounds lower by never eating any carbs at all. Those are my two choices. And I don't know which one you guys would pick, but for me, it's not worth eating that drastically different in order to be 3 pounds lower. Like, I'm happy here. I love my body the way it is. Yeah, I probably have a couple more pounds of fat I could lose if I wanted to. I still have 18 pounds of fat, and of course we all do need some fat because fat is essential to life. But yeah, it's just not worth it to me. I'm happy, and I love that I'm able to have a potato sometimes, or go out to Thai food and have rice, or and for each of us, what you're able to maintain with may be different. For instance, I have given up a lot of foods that many of you would be like, oh my goodness, I could never do that. Like I gave up gluten 3 years ago. I gave up sugar pretty much 3 years ago. I gave up nuts and dairy 6 months ago, and yeah, I used to love cheese, I used to love yogurt, but I had more than one reason for giving it up. When I gave up the nuts and dairy, it was just a trial run, first of all. I figured I could always go back to eating it if I wanted, and I found that not only did my weight go down, but it was easier to maintain just in general, whereas before I felt like it was more work to maintain my weight and I'd have to correct more often. Without the nuts and dairy, I pretty much never have to correct. And I also found that it reduced inflammation and my digestion is so much better. So for me in that case, it was worth making those dietary changes because I reaped multiple rewards that I felt made my life more enjoyable and more easy. And so that's why it was worth it to me. But you know, for me, I'm able to eat some carbs and I don't gain weight and I don't feel like I need to lose more weight. And so for that, you know, for me, that works well. And you know, for you guys, you may find different scenarios and different things happening and different foods that, you know, you giving up are create good results or other ones that don't, and you guys will have to figure that out. So anyway, the point is you have to weigh out these different choices that you have and decide for yourself what's more important to you. And sometimes you might not know the outcome of a certain thing, but sometimes if you think of things as a trial, that can help you to try something that might be a little bit outside of your comfort zone or outside of what you wanted, just to see, you know, just to check. Because really in truth, if you can stabilize your weight 5 or 7 pounds higher, without having to do constant steak days, for a lot of you, that really may be a good choice. Lastly, I just want to say, I don't want this to be taken as meaning like don't bother trying to maintain within 2 pounds and kind of be laid back about it and don't be strict about P3, because that's definitely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you've done your very best with P3 and you've addressed all the different possible issues for gaining in P3, and you still can't seem to maintain in that 2 pound window, that's when you probably want to consider letting yourself stabilize higher. But I definitely advocate taking P3 seriously, you know, doing all the things that I said in my doable way for phase 3 and my best way for phase 3, which I'll link to those in the article that goes with this. So definitely do take P3 seriously. But I've just realized, you know, I've communicated with thousands of you guys now, and I know what the reality is for a lot of women. I think HCG is amazing, but there are a lot of things that contribute to the inner workings of each of our bodies when it comes to, you know, hormones and our metabolism and just all of the different stuff that affects our ability to maintain weight and maintain weight loss. And I don't think HCG just miraculously fixes all those. So those are things that after you're done with HCG, you may still have to work on things and try to figure out the causes of certain things to see if you can fix it. And that's why I think as a result, there are a number of women who will need to go ahead and stabilize a little higher. And maybe in the meantime, or, you know, along the way, they'll maybe try to figure out what it is exactly, if it's their thyroid or certain hormones that are, you know, not in balance. There's really so much to it. And I wish I could give you guys a little more direction in that regard, but just don't give up. Don't think you're a failure if things aren't working for you as perfectly as you had hoped or the same way as it did for somebody else. Because just remember, really what matters is that you have some good results, right? And even if it takes you longer to lose all the weight you wanted, or whatever the case may be, it's worth it in order to get the results that you want up to a point. And at that point that you get where it's no longer worth it, then, you know, don't make any further changes. So it can be easy to feel sorry for ourselves sometimes. You know, my actual weight loss with HCG was not super fast. I didn't lose a pound a day. I still get emails, you know, from people who are upset that they're not losing that pound a day that they read online. And I don't know hardly anybody who does that. And honestly, I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter because I'm here. It's been 17 months since my last round. I feel like I can maintain this for life. I feel great. And it doesn't matter if it took me an extra round or two to get here. I'm fine with that. I know that I didn't cheat on most of my rounds, and I felt that I did the best way for myself, and that's really all you want to feel for yourself as well. All right, you guys, you take care. That's the end of this 3-part series. I hope you guys found it useful. You can find me on Facebook, HCGChica. You can find me just through my website, obviously, hcgchica.com. I have tons of other videos and articles and tons more on the way. I must have, I don't know, at least 30 blog posts that are all half written right now. I'm always getting new ideas, always from you guys. You're always giving me ideas for new articles. And so, you know, yeah, subscribe. If you go to my website and you subscribe to my email list, I always let everybody know when there's a new blog post up. So that's kind of the best way to stay on top of like what's newest. So if you want to do that, you can. All right, you guys, take care. Bye.